Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. All right, hello and welcome, constant sports fans and friends. We have another really exciting guest and episode today. We're going to be diving into the world of corporate partnerships, sponsorships, team sponsorships, all things sponsorships and partnerships with longtime industry leader Taylor Mounts. So thanks for joining us today, Taylor.
Connor, thanks so much. Number one big fan of your podcast, and I'm excited to get into all things sponsorships today. So let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's get into it. And a little background on Taylor, who's been in the industry for quite some time, jumping around from teams and leagues. So he has really good experience, whether it's with the UFC, with McNeese State, with in all sports really. We got the UFC, we have baseball, we've got college, we've got soccer in here, sports fives in there as well. So a lot of good industry experience to tap into. But Taylor, give, I guess, the listeners and viewers a little bit of a kind of elevator pitch, if you will, kind of where you've been, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm the founder and CEO of Mount Sports and Entertainment. As you've alluded to, all the stops I've made, I've done nothing else professionally other than sell sports sponsorships. So I've done nothing else. I was a former collegiate D3 basketball player who had a good career, and I thought I wanted to coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to grad school at Eastern Washington, and I was a graduate assistant on the men's basketball staff. And it was not the same as it was when I was a player, it was fast paced, and it was everything that I loved about being in the sports business. But it just, from a standpoint of starting where that was, it didn't do a lot for me. And so while I was still taking my master's courses, I kind of figured out what sponsorship was. I was like, oh wait, so it's advertisers pay money to be in these games, right? I think so long as anyone watches sports, you're aware of the logos, but you don't necessarily make it your business. And so my toxic trait now is every time I watch a game or shoulder programming and everything like that, I always see what logo's there, what sponsor. I wonder why they did that buy. I wonder who they're trying to reach. Maybe I should call them. So kind of ruined my viewing experience. But look, I spent 12 years in sports. I've moved a lot, which I think for anybody out there that wants to get into sports is you kind of got to understand that. I mean, it's kind of a corollary to coaching. If you see a lot of college football coaches that move around, and a lot of the way to move up is to move. And it's not like, for our business, there's only a finite amount of opportunities in each city, in each state. And I think it's a little different now with, work from home. But I think especially working for a team, I mean, there's only, Las Vegas, there's the Raiders, there's going to be the A's, and, the Golden Knights and the Aces. So there's 4 teams. That's it. There's only, and that's when you take a head of sponsorship, that's 4 jobs and sponsor. So it's like 15 jobs in the state. Right. And so I think so many times a lot of people say, oh, I really want to work for the Lakers. It's like, okay, well, I don't think it's going to happen right now. Right. And so for me, I've moved and I've really enjoyed and still am connected with so many people I worked with. I mean, I started at the UFC as an intern, and they had just got off Spike TV and just had their first fight on Fox.
Okay.
And this is their old headquarters. It was across the street from Palace Station. It's not in the new headquarters that they're in now. And it was just really, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do, right? Yeah. I mean, the staff on the partnerships side, so the boss of the department was Mike Mossholder, who he was executive vice president there. He's been the chief commercial officer for the Cleveland Browns. He's been on my resume since I was an intern, which is fantastic. And then the other day, there was Jim Favola, who is the president of a Premier League club, AFC Bournemouth. There was Brett Sadler, who is a marketing executive now for the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's Markel Martin, who's an agent and who represents Francis Ngannou, and there's just so many. It just was such a great launching pad for me to really understand. And of course, it was nice to be around the minds of a Dana White,
Right.
who when people look at his exterior, I think they see a guy who's hard charging. But
Mhm.
I say this, and not because I've worked for him twice, but he's unbelievable, nicest person you'll ever meet. So after the UFC, I needed to get a business development job. I needed to show that not only as an intern, right, but I can do the job. So first job I had was at McNeese State in Lake Charles, Louisiana. A lot of people say they want to work in sports, but not a lot of people go to Lake Charles, Louisiana. And I was the head of sponsorship, so we were a Learfield type company, and I did everything. I sold the sponsorships, I activated the sponsorships. I remember one time I sold a partnership to Chick-fil-A, and I was hanging the foul pole banners on the foul
Baseball
pole.
field. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was not. I'm not afraid of heights, so it wasn't great. But yeah, look, and then I went from there. I went to the Arizona Diamondbacks, and at a time when in Arizona that was the place to be. They were okay from a standpoint of on the field, but off the field they were industry leaders with um, Derek Hall and so many people that work there that have kind of springboarded themselves into other leadership positions in sports. Then I went to Auburn to Sports Properties. That was one of the first hires for Fox College Sports Properties. That we took over the agreement from IMG, and again, first time at Auburn. I remember I got there in probably July, and our first game was in September. And I remember taking clients in the field, and I'm looking at Bo Jackson and Dabo Swinney, and there's 90,000 fans in the stadium, and I'm like, where am I? It was the coolest experience to kind of pinch yourself, right? Like, oh, this is so great. And then, I went to college in Oregon, so I moved back to Portland. I worked for sports agency called Lagadier, who's now been renamed Sport 5, but I was in their golf events division. So we put on 2 PGA events and 2 web.com, now Corn Ferry events a year. So that was, great to understand what goes into a golf tournament, what goes
Sure.
into an event, from sponsorship to operations. And then I moved over to the Portland Timbers of Major League Soccer. And, from there, I met one of my mentors that has become such a great friend and colleague and person I could bounce so many ideas off of, was the president of the club, Mike Golub. And he has everything that he's done in sports, from moving the Grizzlies from Vancouver to Memphis, working for the New York Rangers, working for the Blazers, working for Nike. I mean, he's Dartmouth undergrad, Stanford MBA, very intelligent human being that has I don't know for what reason, but kind of took me under his wing at the Timbers. And I spent 4 seasons there, and that was an interesting time in terms of not only during COVID, which MLS had the first tournament out of all major sports to come back to their MLS is Back tournament, but
Right.
also the change from regional sports television to the Apple TV deal.
Hmm.
And I'll hit on that in a little bit. And then, from there, I wanted to take some swings. I wanted to take some swings with some startups. So I went to, Slam Ball, and we brought that back. We raised some money in Series A, and we had a, great summer of 2023. I moved over to Thrill One, which was acquired by Dana White and Fiume Capital. They do Nitro Cross, Nitro Circus, street league skateboarding that really goes on the edge of culture. And then, I think everyone gets to a point where, looking at the landscape of everything and say, could I do this for some of these leagues and clubs that, I think there's a lot of big agencies out there, and they're fantastic and they provide a lot of value, but they provide a lot of value for the New York Yankees. They
Right.
provide a lot of value for the Lakers, but for, a high growth sport, call it, there wasn't a lot out there. So, I think for me, I've always been a fan of the underdog. I've been a fan of the little guy, and I think that's kind of led me to where I'm at today. It started my own sports marketing agency.
Perfect. Yeah, great segue into that. And I think, one of the main lessons kind of from your journey is to, like you said, move, find out you not only move, but you find all these people, find all these connections that are, paying dividends later in your career and, further in your career as you go. So I think that's kind of one of the key pieces, at least that I took away from kind of your journey in sports and moving from place to place, meeting new people, growing and learning, and now with your own sports and entertainment kind of business company, rolling it out into the world. What's kind of been, you hear athletes talk about, like their welcome to the NFL moment. What has been your, like welcome to the business kind of moment, right? It can be in any of your, I guess, past
Yeah, no,
experiences.
great question. I think for me, definitely that example of walking onto the field with clients and seeing, Bo Jackson and Dabo Sweeney and saying, you know, I was 20, 25, 26 years old and saying, this is, oh my God. Right.
Unreal.
Like, yeah, I think for so many people, you get into sports because it shows a sense of community. And like, then once you get into the sports business side, it's very different. Like
Hmm.
it's definitely, it's a business. It's very much so, just like any other business, there's revenue, there's expenses, there's profits, there's debt. And how do you kind of make that all work? And I think that's the biggest thing for me has been like, being around some of these, um, idols that I've grown up with. But I think my idols have now switched from being sports legends to sports business leader,
Yeah.
right? Like the um, Mike Golub, who I mentioned. I mean, there's so many people who, you look at a Tom Penn, who's the chief executive officer of San Diego FC. And this is, by the way, his second stint as a CEO. He was CEO of, he made LAFC into what they are now, into $1 billion club. And so for me, a lot of industry leaders, um, I'm fascinated that take a brand from X and bring it to Y.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've always been fascinated by how, in this busy world of sports, because sports changes every day. I
Hmm.
mean, in like think of 5 years ago, there was TikTok, but
Right.
nobody was streaming anything on it. And I think now when you look at like the creators and influencers, and I think that landscape is going to change sports. I think in the next 5 to 6, 7 years of we might see the NBA Thursday night package on a creator's channel.
Yeah.
And I think for so long people, talked about streaming and they're like, oh, Netflix is going to do this and Netflix is going to do that. And we've seen it. Like
Mhm.
look at MLS. They had took a whole league and put it on Apple TV, which I think was, pretty amazing. So I think the fun thing about this business is that it changes every day. You kind of got to be nimble. You have to,
Yeah.
understand of industry trends and try to guess as to the best of your ability with the knowledge and data you have in front of you to make that decision.
Uh-huh. And kind of going off that, you mentioned a little bit the, sports is a business, right? You have revenue, expenses, etc., debt, whatever it is. When you're going into, obviously, one of the main drivers in a team's revenue is going to be the sponsorships and the money to bring it in, along with the ticket sales and all that stuff. But as far as the sponsorship goes, for a team side, right? Like you work for a property, or like the Portland Timbers. What do they kind of just for the listeners' views? Do they just kind of say like, "Hey Taylor, go find as many sponsors as possible, or are they trying to hit a certain goal, or what does that kind of look like?"
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, just like any other revenue producing department, you have revenue goals,
Mhm.
and we try to be as strategic as possible, and we try to have less is more. So we try
Yeah.
to have, the least amount of sponsors that on average have higher deal points than others. But again, at the end of the day, like well, if we can hit revenue, we can hit revenue. So I think partnerships is twofold. I think it's an art and a science. I think when we look at brands that are spend a lot of money in sports, they're very strategic. They're very there's a lot of decisions that go into a sponsorship. It's not just one guy making a decision of, yeah, that sounds good. When you're asking for you know, six, 700, 800,000, million, $2 million, there's going to be a lot of people in the room that you have to, convince. And I don't mean convince in a way of changing their, marketing plan and changing their, brand identity, but showing how, the attention of the fan and the engagement and the, demographic of the fan is one that they want to reach, one that can help them grow their business, and one that can ultimately, have a positive public light, right? Like, people want to, that come out with a new product and you say your official, soda of the Yankees, that lends a lot of customer trust in that,
Yeah,
right?
a little
People
brand
trust.
equity.
Exactly. So pretty, a lot of brands look, they borrow the brand equity of the team in order for them to, raise their brand depending on
Hmm.
where they're at in their life cycle of their business. So, look, I always say I sell, brands to fans, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I like it.
brands, we actually, we don't do a lot of selling the sport. I mean, unless someone's a huge, obviously, fan of the team, which is great. But I think a lot of the times we go down to say, hey, look, here's who you're marketing your product to. You're marketing to a product that an average age of 28 years old, they really like to go hiking on the weekends, and they have a dual income house and they make over $125,000, and they're going to open a credit card next
Mm.
month. All those psychographics, and especially with all the data that we've been provided in this day and age, allows us to really nail down the customer and look how, and helps us compete with, take some of those brand dollars away from digital marketing spends, right?
Mhm.
Like, you're a brand and you want to spend money and key in on a specific demo, you can do that really easily with Meta. You can do that really easily
Yeah,
with Google.
true.
But I think from them, understanding that you're just another ad,
Yep.
and sports is, and especially live sports, is still one of the few um, mediums that allow, fans don't pause it, fans don't
Mhm.
record it, fans don't watch it when they want to, fans watch it when they're there, fans watch it when they're at a bar, fans watch it when they're at home, right? And I think as the distribution channels have evolved, you see a lot of teams and leagues trying to be social and digital first, right? I
Yeah.
think 10 years ago, if you said you want to start a sports property, you said, okay, what's your TV deal? Now you don't have to have a TV deal.
Yeah.
And so I think just from that, um, I think it's fascinating of where this business is going to go it's much more tangible now for people to be able to watch Power Slap,
Mhm.
or people to watch a sport like 𝐒𝐪 which Pro League Network does, or a lot of these ones that have really, really big social engagement that um, can go get advertisers. So I think all that, going back to being said, is that we try to have a point from a revenue standpoint of, let's get these partners, let's give them big assets, let's make sure that they get a return too, because the
Yeah.
only reason they're spending money is so they can make money back.
Yeah.
So for us, we try to be a brand solution rather than say put your logo here. We try to make a lot of things of how can we further that step of not only making a logo, but how can we make this a logo with a mural that fans can take a photo of in the stadium and then tweet, and the best tweet of the night wins said product.
Right.
So
Building out a good asset package. It reminds me of, you have like these famous photos, or like in the UFC, right? You have that kind of the sponsors that are on the canvas, and if there's like a legendary knockout, like that sponsor's in there for, forever. Essentially, that
oh
photo keeps coming up. That fight video is going to keep coming up, and even if they're not a sponsor anymore, they're still, front and center. So I think that part is cool with the kind of the digital age, especially.
yeah, I mean, a lot of that is earned media, like,
Hmm.
especially when, and that's a big pitch. And
Yeah.
when we're pitching jersey rights, when we were pitching that at the Timbers, and we were pitching sleeve deals, we were saying, hey, look, this is what you're going to get on our channels, but when it gets picked up, when it's on Sports Center, when it's on when it's on Instagram, when it's on TikTok from other people's accounts, that's all earned media. And
Yeah.
so, those big assets, while yes, they are quite expensive, I do believe that for a brand that's willing to want to go out and have a megaphone, that there's no better spend, I think, from an advertiser than sports partnerships.
Yeah, agreed. I think yeah, like you mentioned, it's a great deal there. And as like you mentioned earlier, you've kind of spent your entire career in this industry, and then obviously culminating to Mount Sports and Entertainment. So you mentioned a little bit about the motivation behind starting it, and kind of making it your mission to, I guess, modernize sports marketing. I love the kind of on the website, it's the no fluff, just revenue. Great tagline in there. So speak to that, I guess the viewers and the clients that you worked with, and maybe some projects that are top of mind.
Yeah, well, look, I started this because I think I wanted to be. I was on the other side for so long. I
Right.
saw kind of from an agency perspective how a lot of people just cared about let's go get a retainer and not do a lot of work. And I think for me is I like to be in the trenches with clients, right? Like, well, how are we taking this out to the market? And a lot of times, whenever you start a new sports league or new sports team or an emerging channel that has maybe 1 million or 2 million social followers, is how do we 10x that? I think a lot of it is what's the narrative, right? Like a lot of people, sports is still about what is the narrative, right?
Right.
And I think why should you care?
Mhm.
And there's so much out there now that there's, from a brand perspective, they have a lot to pick from. They have the influencers, they have NIL, they have every college in America, they have every sports team in America. How do you get through that and understand, A, get the meeting, B, understand what their goals are, right? Because I think too many people get on phone calls and talk too much. I used to do it. I probably still do it a little bit too much, but being able to listen, to what a brand or an advertiser, what are their key performance indicators,
Mhm.
and from there, tailoring a package for said brand in order to do that. So the clients I work with now, I work with a team in professional bull riding. I work with you know, a two teams in an alternative golf space, not the PGA Tour. I'll let your mind go on that. Um, and I work with a combat sports league, and I work with a couple other digital sports properties. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, all of them are saying, "Hey, from your experience, how can we better take this to the market, and how can we think about this a little different?" I think the knock on myself for a little bit of my career was that I jumped around, and look, I think that it was the perfect thing for me because I got to learn so much. I learned
Yeah.
about soccer, I learned about college football, I learned about, you know, golf tournaments. I learned about mega brands like the UFC. I've learned about how to take a brand from zero and get them on ESPN, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I think getting Slam Ball when we had it on ESPN, I told a colleague this, but it was probably one of the best moments of my career. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I think a lot of people take for granted of like how much work and effort goes into making a league, making us, thinking about that and the capital that comes with it. And so I think I've been very fascinated probably the last 6 to 12 months of leaning in to think, who are some of these investors that are investing in new teams and leagues. I mean, and look what they're doing. Like, look at Unrivaled. Unrivaled is
Right.
amazing, you
Crazy.
know, and we, they did 23 million in their first year of revenue. And I think,
Unreal.
I mean, I think that's unbelievable. And kudos, a lot of that has to do not only with the team at Unrivaled, but also Horizon Sports and Experiences, run by David Levy, and so former, CEO of Turner Broadcasting. But and when you look at how a lot of these leagues are evolving, look at TGL, look at Unrivaled, right? There's a lot of those popping up that people are understanding. You don't need to have a mega TV deal and a 12-month schedule to be successful. You just have to have the right attention. Attention is the new currency, right? And as long as you can garner that, and as long as you can be able to produce that in mass, then I think the sky's the limit. And again, I'm excited for new leagues to come in the next 12 months, 24 months. Who knows?
Yeah, no, for real. And I think the kind of like the alternative streaming, like you mentioned earlier, where it's like or like the Pat McAfee show, right? They kind of the on-field, whether it's shows and things like that. I think more of those are coming because I feel like the
Percent.
consumers could really find I guess enjoyment of kind of not like the traditional broadcast, but like a couple of guys just talking, like you would about a game. And I think these alternative broadcasts are really going to start to pick up steam with these new leagues, like you mentioned. But other than kind of the new streaming alternative broadcasts, as far as like emerging trends with like live sports, interactive things like that. What's kind of another trend that you can think of? If not, it's all good. But I was just curious if there's anything else you think's on the up and up.
Yeah, no, look, I think alternative streams of creators and influencers. I think we're going to see more of that. Creator sports content gets twice as much engagement as traditional sports like do on social. And look, social media is only going to keep ramping up. Social media and streaming platforms, of whether we're already seeing it. Like NBA is going to be on Peacock next year. NBA is
Yeah,
going to be on Amazon. I mean,
right.
the NFL is doing a alternative stream only on YouTube from Brazil.
Yeah,
The NFL, which again, I think the revenue number last year was pretty. I think it was 23 billion.
yeah, something like that.
But again, a traditionalist like the NFL has taken that and run with it. So, look, it's going to keep evolving. I think look out for creators and influence to be more and more involved. I mean, you see a lot of these leagues invite creators and influencers to All-Star game, right? To NFL flag football, to the NBA All-Star game, to MLB All-Star, right? All that because they know that they have an audience that is very engaged. And I think as we keep understanding the dynamics of, like, I think a lot of traditional sports are going to hire a lot more people from, creator and influencer, companies. And I think we're going to see a lot more of those become media houses, right? They're
Yeah.
not just like mom and pop, but they're going to become, for better or worse, the Mr. Beasts of the world. They're beginning
Hmm.
to become a brand.
Yeah.
Um, and look, I mean, it's fantastic. Like I love to see, some of these guys that are golf influencers that I mean, I'm a golfer and like Bob does sports. I remember watching him 8 years ago. And
Yeah.
I met him at a live golf tournament. I was like, I didn't care about anybody else at the live golf tournament other than him. Um, so that just shows that as these leagues evolve, I think you're going to see a lot more creators and influencers be in the conversation of not just kind of, they're not just going to have alternative broadcasts. I think it will be the broadcast. So we'll see.
Yeah, agreed. And well, then you have like these creator leagues, and there's been a few like basketball kind of 3-on-3 leagues and golf leagues, and I think that's only on the up and up, and especially when they kind of build their fan base and community, and that the big five, I guess, leagues, take a page out of that playbook because they have these creators have such a rabid fan base that they'll show up to an event, they'll do anything to kind of
Absolutely.
watch them grow. So that is very cool to see. And then as you continue to grow out your business and your company. Where can the listeners and viewers and future clients find you? Website, all that good stuff.
Mounts-se.com. It's very weird when I type in my email at
Yeah.
taylor@mounts-se.com. But yeah, look, I mean, I think I'm interested in a lot of things, right? And I think, looking at, like, I think I'm a big fan of Major League Soccer. I'm a big fan of what they did with Apple. I'm a huge fan of some of the emerging leagues. As again, I said, going back to, Tom Penn and San Diego FC and like those type of markets that have, teams that have left, right?
Yeah.
I think you're going to see this and maybe not in the next couple of years, but I think in the next 4 or 5 years, there's going to be a team coming back to Oakland. That's going to be one of the bigger expansion leagues teams, of whether that be baseball, football, basketball. I don't know, but
Right.
you look at some of these leagues, these markets that teams have left, i.e., San Diego with the Chargers, right?
Hmm.
And San Diego is such a soccer city, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like so close to the border of Mexico. It's like it's young, it's hip, and they get 35,000 a game.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and they've had the CEO who's has the playbook and has done it, and so I think for them, I'm excited about all these, the future of sports, and I have a lot of very interesting conversations every day, whether it be with operators that have creators and influencers that want to understand more about sponsorship strategy. I work with some universities to say how can we better understand these big sponsor categories, right?
Right.
So I think it allows me to kind of jump from one day, 1 minute I'm talking to a golf league, the next one I'm talking to creator influencer league, the
Yeah.
next day I'm talking to an investor about investing in an English football club. Like I think it just allows me to kind of not only broaden my network, but for me, I think you have to be a lifelong learner, and I think for me, I'm aware of what I don't know, and I want to understand and learn, and how can I get better, and
Yeah.
and because there's been this business is fascinating, and again, I hope you can understand the passion that I have when it comes to doing this, because I've done nothing else in my career, and I've never seen it as I don't think it's ever been like, oh, I have to go to work. It's like it's very cool. I get to wake up and do this,
Uh-huh.
and I think when I wanted to get in it, I was thinking, man, if I could just get in and just like it's okay, and I have. So it's been great, and it's kind of weird. Like I just turned 35, and like people are like asking me for advice, younger people. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I'm right.
A
Like
little surreal.
I never think I'm like the getting older, but that's certainly true. So
Yeah. Well, it's been an awesome journey, and especially kind of seeing the different insights and the different sectors you've touched within kind of the singular sponsorships and partnerships sector. But we appreciate you coming on today, Taylor, and sharing your insights and the partnership and sponsorship industry. I know the listeners, viewers are going to get a good a lot of learning engagement out of this, especially. And make sure to check out MSE, Mount Sports Entertainment, for future clients and properties and whatnot. And this has been another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast, and you'll be able to find this anywhere you get your podcast: YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all that good stuff. So thanks again, Taylor, for coming on, and we'll stay in touch.
thanks so much.
You got it.